Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We're glad to have you with us for today's presentation featuring HTM experts Heidi Horn and Dustin Smith. Heidi and Dustin will discuss how HTM teams can learn to work smarter, not harder, when staff count and budgets are limited by creating their own connected hospital. Nuvolo Product Manager Nikki Reilly will also share what's new at Nuvolo in 2022. You'll learn all the great new features, new user experience, and new interoperability coming out of Nuvolo that will allow HTM departments to be even more connected to the data you need. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Nuvolo. Nuvolo is the only software company that offers a connected workspace for healthcare solution, a modern-day CMMS combined with the capabilities of an integrated workplace management system. Nuvolo helps HTM departments make better clinical and operational decisions, and automated workflows make your job easier. For more information, please visit nuvolo.com. A few announcements before we get started. We're already planning the 2022 MD Expo in Atlanta. MD Expo strives to provide healthcare technology management professionals with a unique, intimate, and rewarding conference second to none. You don't want to miss our 20th anniversary in April of this year. Please visit mdexposhow.com for all the details. Let's give one lucky attendee the opportunity to win a Webinar Wednesday shirt by answering the following question. On the nuvolo.com website homepage, what is the headline listed? You can find the answer by visiting our sponsor's website. Please use the questions feature on the GoToWebinar dashboard to submit your answer. As always, today's webinar is eligible for one continuing education credit from the ACI. You can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. More details on this at the end of today's webinar. We'll wrap up with a live Q&A. You can submit your questions at any time during the webinar by using the questions feature on the webinar dashboard. We'll get through as many questions as time allows. As I mentioned earlier, our speakers today are Heidi Horn, Dustin Smith, and Nikki Reilly. Heidi, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Jennifer. We'll get started then. Let's start with some quick introductions of who we are, and then I'm going to go over the agenda, and then we will get into the presentation. So Jennifer introduced me. My name is Heidi Horn. I'm VP of Healthcare Marketing Strategy at Nuvolo. Have been here for about 2.5 years. And prior to joining Nuvolo, I was a VP of HTM for a large health system, about 22 hospitals. I'm also an AMI board member, an AMI fellow, and the chair of the Technology Management Council. And I'm very happy to be here today and be presenting to all of you. Dustin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. So I'm Dustin Smith. I'm an advisory solution consultant with Nuvolo. I've been with Nuvolo just shy of 2 years now. Prior to this, I was with Intermountain Healthcare for almost 14 years, and the last role I held there, I was the Director of Central Support with Healthcare Technology Management, and I am a certified Healthcare Technology Manager. And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Nikki.
Thanks, Dustin. Hey everyone, good afternoon. I'm Nikki Reilly. I am the Senior Product Manager at Nuvolo. I've been here for just over 1 year. Prior to that, I've got about 9 years of experience in the SaaS and software subscription model style products. Previously, before joining Nuvolo, I was actually with Physicians Desk Reference, so coming in from a healthcare and then prior to that, an insurance background. So I'm super excited to be with you guys today.
Great, thank you everyone. Okay, so let's go over the agenda real fast. So today what we're going to be talking about is what is a connected hospital, and also about working smarter, not harder, in a connected hospital, which is something we all want to be able to do. Dustin's going to provide a short demo of Nuvolo's Connected Workplace for Healthcare, and then Nikki's going to go over what's new in 2022, hard to say that already, for Nuvolo Connected Workplace, and she's going to be talking about some of our new enhancements. Okay. So with that, I'm going to start it off with what is a connected hospital, and this probably looks fairly familiar to most of you. In the current state for most hospitals, and certainly in the hospital that I belonged to, in the health system I belong to, most of the support functions are siloed. You have your clinical equipment maintenance and management, your HTM teams working fairly independently, your IT departments, design and construction, your capital planning functions, facilities maintenance, real estate, which is another support function I know that we don't work with very often, space planning, environmental services, and the list goes on and on. And obviously, you know, in a hospital, typically these are very much in a silo with some interaction, as we're finding more and more, there needs to be more cooperation and collaboration going on, because there's no longer standalone equipment. You have systems of equipment that involve IT components, facilities components, obviously there's capital planning involved, and all of those things require collaboration between the groups. Add to that, which kind of also encourages silos, most of these departments and functions operate with different applications. So of course you have your enterprise-wide enterprise resource planning, your ERP applications. You have your capital planning applications that finance and the supply chain might be using. You have space planning, project planning that the real estate team might be using, and then multiple CMMS systems for HTM and facilities. In some cases, you have different HTM departments using different CMMS systems within the same health system, and usually facilities also is on a separate system. So there's no interface or interaction between those two applications. And then obviously, finally, the multiple IT incident and cybersecurity apps. So IT is running their cybersecurity apps, their incident management apps, and none of these applications are interfaced or share information between the two of them. So, what we want to talk about today is, obviously you can see, and I think for those of you in HTM, which is probably most of you, you have experienced in your past where you've had to either collaborate or even troubleshoot with the IT department on a particular device that was interfaced, or I should say integrated, that was networked, that had other clinical applications as part of it, and there were issues with it, and you had to work with these different departments to figure out what's going on with this, and you don't have that information sharing, and so it requires literally for you to pick up the phone, send messages, send emails back and forth to figure out what's going on with a particular problem that you might be dealing with. Same with projects. If you have a particular projects, whether it might be a new design project that you're working on with the real estate department, or something that you are trying to do, a master facility project, whatever it might be, you have to obviously look at everybody's different spreadsheets. You have to share information through email. You have to, and everything's disjointed. So there's no one system that is looking at all of this different information. And that's where Nuvolo's Connected Workplace for Healthcare comes in. A connected hospital is essentially one that you have no silos. You have departments that work together. They can share pertinent information in real time to help them perform their jobs better and faster. And then these are some of the examples. There's literally dozens and dozens of different examples of how this can come into play. But if you have, for example, HTM, IT facilities, environmental services, and construction departments working on something together, they will have full visibility into the tasks and projects requiring that collaboration. And again, if they're troubleshooting something that requires different departments to look at different components of a system, either the network or a clinical application or the device itself, or possibly even the chiller or the electrical output or whatever it might be, All those things obviously come into play sometimes, and you have to have that full visibility. Another component of the connected workplace for healthcare is allowing information security and HTM to have collaboration when looking at cybersecurity issues. And that's also includes risks to the particular device on what those cyber risks are, identifying when they occur and when there's a threat involved, and having real-time ability to go find out what's wrong with it with built-in workflows, and who is supposed to go respond to it, where that device is, what it is, whether it's on a patient at the current time. All those things come into play in a connected workplace for healthcare environment. And then finally, capital planning decisions also. Again, how many times have you made or been asked to find out later that there is a decision being made on a clinical device purchase that you did not know anything about? Again, in a connected workplace, that does not occur. You are able to provide that real-time data to determine what devices should be prioritized for capital replacement, which devices have had issues, which devices, what the costs have been to maintain it. All of those go into those capital planning decisions in real time with real data. Okay, I'm gonna go fly through this, and then we have a lot to cover today. So I just wanted to point out some of the pieces of the OT security that we have in our Nuvolo OT security solution. We also have space management that plays into the connected workplace solution, as well as real estate. So now I'm gonna turn it over to Dustin, and Dustin's gonna give us a short demo.
Thanks, Heidi. All right, so as we think through the context of a connected workplace, what we need to build is ultimately a foundation. And at the end of the day, the vast majority of us got into healthcare really in the context in which your role lies. You're in a supportive role, but you're ultimately there to assist in patient care. And so with that in mind, when we think about a connected workplace, we really want clinicians to have the tools in place that assist them in better communicating their needs. So we want a place where an individual is recognized and their specific requests are tied to them, which I can see here. So I can start as a clinician self-serving. If I want to understand where my technician corrective is at, well, right now it's assigned to Dustin, but it's still in a draft state. So we're able to self-serve, and that's going to mitigate certain calls down to the shop. It's also worth recognizing that I have a facilities work order here that's denoted by the beginning of our work order ID. So the goal is making it easier for clinicians to ultimately make a request, and we want that to transcend the different silos that we have in the hospital. So to showcase the easiest way for this to be done as a clinician and pushing our needs out to healthcare technology management, even here, I'm met with visibility as to existing work orders for the tag I just put in. So we're not duplicating that work, which is critical. When we start to think about our peers within the environment of care, whether that's EBS, safety and security, or facilities, oftentimes they don't have the luxury that we do of always having things tied to a tag. So it may likely be more location-based. Well, with this in mind, we were able to develop a native AutoCAD integration that assists us in getting work to a room based on a floor plan. And so then clinicians are able to ultimately request work for those different areas and have it tied very easily to a location that's recognizable based on the context of where they live. Also worth understanding, we just did a really quick facilities request. We also have the ability to put certain EBS tasks in what we call a record producer. So we're making it simple for the clinician not only to request work, but also to have an understanding of the current state of any of their requests. And then you'll notice I have an announcement. Joint Commission's expected soon, and both our facilities group and healthcare technology management, we need our clinicians' help. We want beds and stretchers out of hallways, and we want any ceiling tiles to be checked. So really, we want our clinicians to not only be looking down the halls and ensuring that there's no blockages, but also keeping their eyes to the sky and able to make those requests. So when Joint Commission shows up, every unit is as tidy as possible. So that's one of the ways we start those connections, really bringing those different groups together. Next, as we think through how do we all understand what's expected of us and how does this work within a connected workplace? I don't want to see facilities work, and I would anticipate the vast majority of the facilities group don't want to see my work, but I want to enable that cross communication. Nuvolo leverages dynamic reporting that's unique to oftentimes the individual logged in. So every one of these tiles that you see, whether it's my PM compliance, how I'm doing this month, so I have an understanding of what I still need to perform before the 31st, to the different work orders that I need to complete by type. And I could even ultimately change the way this is aligned if I look at my work from really a department perspective. I also have visibility into any of the work, the labor entries that I've made, and then also any of the work that's contracted. So I can start making those decisions and calling those really authorized service providers to get that scheduled. But when we think about the need for collaboration, we want an easy way to pass it across the fence. For instance, when I'm working on this particular sterilizer, this Century 16, as I start my work, well, even before I start my work, if I notice there's something going on with the steam line, or I understand that there's a need for the boiler downstream, that ultimately needs to be checked before I can perform my work. I could simply hit create facilities work order, and it's going to transfer this work. So we've really put in place those hooks between the different applications to ensure everyone's success. And our facilities, despite the fact that their information lives really in a separate application, they're going to have a lot of the similar functionality that HTM is also able to leverage. And one of those, again, is that dynamic filtering capability. I briefly spoke to our native AutoCAD integration. One of the things that is immensely important right now within the context of healthcare, we need to understand our spaces, what the square footage is associated with patient care, and then also who owns it. And this assists not only facilities, but also healthcare technology management when it comes to resource allocation. I would anticipate there's a good portion of organizations on the line today that really push certain alignment in regards to who owns certain corrective maintenance or even PMs on a department basis. So even from a floor plan perspective, which is going to be used by not only facilities, not only healthcare technology management, but also EVS and safety and security, having this shared location is critical in terms of being able to communicate effectively between these groups. And we've really set up the infrastructure for that communication to be that much simpler. Everyone understands what room 221 is. And then when it comes to managing these spaces, we've put in place the tools for different space planners to be able to effectively update information on these locations as needed, which can be critical when we think about patient care areas and the ways that that positively or negatively impacts our Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement. Continuing on our journey through the connected workplace, when we start out at home. When we start as a technician, our home pages are ultimately meant to assist in planning, assist us in understanding, in the case where I'm managing authorized service providers, what documentation do I need to put into the system? What field service reports? A huge portion of the work at the beginning of the day is going to be understanding, what do I need to put on my cart as far as parts, test equipment, and plan for the day? And then I want to be able to move over to some sort of a mobile application that I can take with me that's going to expedite me putting in documentation, which is going to enable better visibility to all. And that's where our mobile application ultimately shines. Once we've made our plan, then I can come into my work order dashboard. I can have an understanding of what work is out there that ultimately needs to be taken care of. Once I get to my tag, I can drill into that device to have an understanding of any of the work outstanding and start my PM process. We've also made it simpler to record your time through a start and stop timer. So technicians are able to walk up to the device, scan it, ultimately hit play, and then step through the work order, ensuring that they've fulfilled the appropriate criteria to make sure that we are up to speed as far as our OEM or AEM specifications. And once this is done, I can submit this and it's going to be recorded against that work order for all time. This makes it that much easier to explain to either Joint Commission or DNB what steps were taken. Even if we're still closing our work orders with the same resolution detail of completed per OEM specifications, now instead of having to go back and showcase where we're storing the manual, I can show that directly from a work order now. And you can see that verification data stored here. So we're really enabling that real-time documentation, which can assist in decision-making and resource allocation. When we start to think about other groups operating within Nuvolo, we start to think about how the tasks are different. For instance, if EVS is working in the system, we want a very, very simple procedure for them to simply come in and submit it in really easy time entry. And the reason why is because ultimately we need to be focusing on any of those admissions, discharges, and transfers to facilitate room cleanings and room flipping so that as a healthcare organization, our throughput is as high as it ultimately can be with patients and our spaces appropriately safe. So our mobile application is really there to assist with that real-time documentation. We have access to rounds, which is really a checklist that we can record time against. So we're able to take some of those simpler activities that we don't need the same level of documentation as a traditional work order and really pursue those for time. And all of this is enabled through a mobile application available on both Google Play and also the Apple Store that's online and offline capable. So we've done a lot to put really those capabilities in the hands of the appropriate groups. Because at the end of the day, one of the things Nuvolo quickly understood is there's a need for a connected workplace. We need these different groups ultimately working together, and we need to break down those silos. However, there are specific needs that still need to be addressed, and we've ultimately kept that in mind. Some of the areas where we've really put a tremendous focus into the HTM processes and ways that we can really kind of hone in on the needs of healthcare is with our contract management module and being able to track our realized contract value as it pertains to the work performed bounced up against our contract cost. So you start to get a better understanding of, do I want to transition to a time and materials basis, or do I want to keep the contract I have? We've also put a lot of forethought into the way we manage recalls. If everybody thinks through the Alaris BD bezel assembly recall that came out, and I believe it was 2018, one of the big issues we ran into in the beginning is it's a tremendous amount of assets. And you don't want to terrify your technicians. If you suddenly put 500 recall work orders on one tech, you're gonna have a pissed off tech. So one of the things Nuvolo has done immensely well is align the ability to start a recall, but you don't have to create work orders until you're ready. So we can add it to the affected assets, and once we're ready, we can then create a work order, which facilitates that planning process. We've also put a large focus on alternative equipment maintenance and being able to understand, really, is our AEM effective? After creating an AEM, we can start measuring certain key performance indicators such as maintenance cost, labor hours, mean time between failure, and also a risk score suggestion to ensure that as we've transitioned from an OEM to AEM, we are not making our equipment less effective. It's also worth noting that we have put a tremendous amount of effort into OT security and ensuring that healthcare technology management, you want to be able to allocate non-cybersecurity experts ultimately to some of this net new work that needs to be performed. It doesn't take a cybersecurity expert to put a MAC address against a device. And one new piece of functionality that has come into play last year is the ability to start recording your risk assessments as an organization. Before you introduce a new model to your environment, you want to understand, are there any risks or findings? What is the appropriate way to ultimately control those risks? Is it putting a device on a VLAN or ensuring it's behind a physical firewall? And once you have an understanding of certain mitigating controls, and this may not be HTM who's typically performing this risk assessment, but what's interesting about it is you are performing some of the work associated with putting in place those mitigating controls. And with the idea of best resource allocation, we need to ensure that it's easy for our boots on the ground to perform that work. So once work orders are created to assign that work, perform the implementation of those mitigating controls, we need this to be simplified. And that's where, as part of the risk assessment process, we've enabled the ability to put in a procedure that sits in the work order. So the individual who's been typically working on an MP5, if there's a need for a port redirect or any device, you don't have to be a cybersecurity expert to understand how to get to the system admin screen. Because if you've been performing PMs and corrective on this device for the last 5 years, odds are you've already gotten to these areas. So I know as a tech, without being a cybersecurity expert, how to step through these different processes. And that's our configuration that's also a mitigating control. So again, our OT security module, in the way we've architected it, is largely about transparency and resource allocation. We're ingesting certain information coming from the passive monitoring solution, but they're not going to deploy the work orders to the appropriate group to the extent that we can. And so that's been a just quick demonstration of really how Nuvolo has put a focus on the connected workplace and the different groups that ultimately we'd like to see continue to work more and more collaboratively in the future, and how we can ultimately ensure that the appropriate data, business processes, and visibility is shared between these groups. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi, and then we'll give it to Nikki to ultimately close us out.
Great, thanks. All right, so jumping on in, and again, I'm Nikki Reilly. I am the Senior Product Manager here at Nuvolo. And I think it's really important to kind of introduce two different concepts before we go in. One is a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with what a product manager is. So as a quick point of clarification, essentially a product manager, their entire role is to connect what we build as an organization to the service managers and to the technicians, right, that utilize it. So here at Nuvolo, we have 3 core values that you'll see play out. You know, Heidi earlier talked about the value of the connected workplace, that the pain points of having segmented and oftentimes, right, segregated workflows. And Dustin then followed that up by showing you, right, how we create that visibility. But as a product manager, visibility goes both ways, right? One of which is in the actual product itself, but another is with our users, right? And with our marketplace. And so for me, it's really important to come in to help you understand what our values and what our focus is on, right? And I shouldn't say ideally, but the reality is that there are 3 core values that you'll see throughout our product, throughout our innovations and throughout our enhancements, right? First and foremost is there are a lot of complexities in this field. I think every single one of you can really attest to that. You've got hundreds of thousands of assets with different work orders, different planned maintenances, EMs, rounds, so on and so forth. And that is quite a lot to place on your service managers or even on your entire service organization. Creating a tool that can help address those pain points is really vitally important. Right? And just the same way that we're addressing those pain points with our service managers and with our leaders, right? You also have your technicians, right? Who are at the other end of the spectrum and the other users that we want to be cognizant of. And the same way that we address the organizational struggles and trying to manage everything flying from a service manager, it's equally important for our technicians to be empowered as well, right? And narrowing down that focus and giving them what it is that they need while they're out there in the field so that they're not fiddling around and, you know, losing daylight, right? Losing productivity. And of course, from both ends, whether you're a service manager, you're a director, or a technician, everybody is concerned for patient safety, for joint commission, for audits, right? From that, the concept of there's always going to be administrative fire drills, right? Of, well, this is due and oh, this dropped through. So as we go through today, everything that I'm going to show you, what's new and what Nuvolo is super excited to bring to the market to 2022 really focuses on these items. So let's take a look at what we have. First off, planned maintenance, right? This is the bread, the butter of all individuals here. And I think so much so when we talk about managing the complexities, it really starts furthest upstream, right? And that's in when you're trying to get in from all of your OEMs, for all of your devices, for all of your locations, and juggling all of that to put it in one location, right? From Nuvolo's standpoint, we made a real big focus in 2022 and in 2021 to modernize our tools. I think it's such a shame that as users, we're familiar with great user experiences from Google to Facebook to others, but oftentimes our operational tools seem to be 10 years behind. Now, part of that is because there's such an immense amount of data and information, but we really want to focus and put the emphasis on the users, putting their experience first to make sure that the tool best support you, right? So here we redid our planned maintenance and really combining and making sure that regardless of all of your different intervals that you may have, your daily, weekly, monthly, if it's every 500 uses, if it's 6 months past the last time something was completed, that we all put it in one centralized location. That way the tool can provide you the tools to say, hey, look, this is what's going, this is everything that you have. If you want to target specific assets at a specific location, if you want all model types, some asset types, only assets at this location, right? The tool can do that for you, and not without having to go down 15 different steps of click this, then that, go here. Right, the value is really in making sure that service managers have the tools necessary to really manage those complexities, right, with those struggles. Next, we're going to talk about centralized visibility, right, and what that looks like. Right, and again, we're kind of looking at this from a service manager standpoint, though most certainly technicians, right, also hit a brunt of this as well. I think so many things that we see today are purely just in bulk. Anytime that you've got a high number of whatever it is, right? Work orders, planned maintenance, widgets, M&Ms, right? It doesn't matter. Once you get to a high volume of it, it becomes difficult to make that information consumable, right? How do you imagine 100,000 pennies? Well, it's quite difficult. So for us, we really want to put the focus on making sure that the information is in a consumable format to allow you to have empowered decision making. And I think a great deal of so much of going on with planned maintenance is in capacity planning, right? And saying, okay, how many team members do I have in December? I have half my team going out on leave, going on vacation, and I've got 133 hours of work that needs to get done. Providing visual tools are an extreme productivity save, right? And they can also give you foresight into understanding what's coming down. And of course, from an operational standpoint, that just begins the task of capacity planning and really optimizing your teams. Okay. Next and lastly, we're going to talk about, I shouldn't say lastly, but second to lastly, talking about avoiding fire drills. I think the term reports, dashboards is widely overused so much, but they're a necessity of life. Again, when we're talking about that immense amount of information. Our goal here and what we produced for our new planned maintenance tool that makes its debut in of course, January, later on this month, is this concept of I don't want to see everything. I only want to see that requires action. This concept of being able to sort through the noise, making it easier for you to sort through what was 100,000, now it may down to only 100 or only 14, right, that are critical or that, hey, require action or, are looking at almost becoming past due. Taking a visual component and sorting through the noise are just some of the elements that as a system, we can better help address our users in their business process. Okay. Lastly, we're going to take a look at work orders. So we talked about planned maintenance, but that's really from a service manager, from a director, a PM coordinator, right, that are really doing that. But I think it's equally important to show full cycle, that it's not just the decision makers, it's also the technicians, those that are responsible for executing that work, right? And one of our core values is empowering technicians. So that same smooth UI, the same concept of, okay, I want to be able, I was out in the field and I updated 50 different infusion pumps. I found them, I did the monthly PM. Now I have to sit back at my desk and now enter it in. When we went out there in the field and we did our user research, we found oftentimes whole days were being lost just to do data entry. Right? And that's just not a good use of time. And it's a very big pain point for your technicians. So this concept of being able to bulk update, right? To select those 50, those 10, 15, however many infusion pumps that you were successful with. And in one smooth stroke, right? Answer the checklist one time and have it then replicate across all is a big, big time saver, right? For our technicians, we're also introducing in saved views and filters, right? Which is such a shame because it's things that we're all familiar with. And it's such a good idea that they're now coming into more operational based tools. So we're really excited that this concept of, again, being able to save your views of, I travel to our service shop that's on the opposite side of town on Tuesdays. Well, that's great. But every time you'd have to go into the system, for so many tools out there, you'd have to recreate the wheel, right? Every time I go in, had to do my filters. Well, why can't I just save my favorites, right? And so that again is coming in 2022. So overall, just to kind of re-hit on everything, Heidi really stressed the value, right? Why connected workplace, the pain points of that segmented workflow. Dustin explained to you and showed you the actual system, right, in a demo, how we create that visibility. And then of course, from a product management side, really showing you why and a little bit of background and the focus that we have in creating visibility and trust with our clients and with our market moving into 2022. So Heidi, to you.
Yeah, do you want to touch on SMB or would you like me to?
Oh, I'm so sorry. You can go ahead.
Okay, well, we also wanted to introduce our new Nuvolo Connected Workplace SMB for small to mid-sized hospitals, which is now available. And again, what this does is it takes all these great enhancements and features and user experience that have been developed in Nuvolo over the past year and puts them into a product that's specifically designed for small to mid-sized hospitals. It's much more economical, easier to implement. It's a kind of a self-service implementation. And again, as I mentioned, it's designed specifically for these standalone hospitals. So again, they can reap the benefits of what Nuvolo offers without the many configurations that sometimes have to go into for a bigger health system. So some of the key benefits, again, I mentioned it's easy to implement, it's ready to use, it is not customizable. It is so it comes out and it's kind of a plug and play solution. You get the access to the newest version without having to go through updates. When the updates are available, you automatically get those. And again, it is a workplace management solution that meets your growing needs. So if you are a growing health system, or if you're a hospital that is being growing, then you can grow. Nuvolo SMB allows it to grow with you. And mention some of these highlights over here, and won't go through each one of those in the interest of time because we do want to get to some questions. But this is something, if you're out there right now and you are in a small standalone hospital or a mid-sized standalone hospital and are interested, this is something that's new, brand new, and love to talk to you about that. So with that, we are going to open it up for questions. Let me get to that slide. And I believe, Jennifer, you said that they can put it in, there's a questions piece on your taskbar there. And if you want to enter questions, and then Jennifer will let us know what those are.
That's right. Thank you, Heidi. As a reminder, we will allow questions using the GoToWebinar dashboard. You can enter your questions using the questions feature. Thank you all for all of this valuable information. And we do have a few questions that have come in already. We'll start out with those. The first question is, can HTM and IT transfer work orders and tickets in Nuvolo?
I'll take this one. Yeah, the answer is yes, if IT is using ServiceNow as its incident tracking system. So we mentioned that if facilities and HTM are both on Nuvolo, they can transfer work orders. The same goes as if, as we know, Nuvolo is on the ServiceNow platform, and if the incident tracking system that IT is using is ServiceNow, those tickets can be transferred, which again is very, very efficient, as you well know. I talked about this earlier. There's very few standalone devices anymore. They're either networked or they're part of a larger system that is often supported by IT. So if you have a call come in for something that is supported by IT, it goes to HTM, or you need the ability to pass tickets back and forth as something is being worked through. If they are on ServiceNow, you can do so. Thank you. Good question.
All right, our next question is, why would a hospital need Nuvolo OT security if they have a passive network monitoring tool?
It's an excellent question, and I'll take that one. So the passive monitoring solutions are phenomenal in terms of being able to recognize anomalies, understanding certain threats and vulnerabilities against devices. Where the need for OT security comes in, it's when it comes to triaging that work. you can ultimately get a large portion of the visibility and some additional context of technical information associated with your devices through the passive monitoring solution. But deploying those boots on the ground that oftentimes may not even need the technical expertise of your cybersecurity team, that's where OT security comes into play. And even when we went through the risk assessment portion of our demo today, when we showed that procedure and I was talking to the potential of somebody being able to do like a port redirect, those procedures is really where a lot of that value comes in, is being able to make things as simple as possible so frontline technicians can perform the work rather than, we'll say, the high tower cybersecurity team. And that's ultimately where the difference lies. As I think if you were to sum it up, it's really triaging and resource allocation. Great question.
All right, our next question is, what else does Nuvolo have planned for its CMMS?
Dustin, I can actually take this one. I don't know if you're about to jump in there, but in terms of what's next for us, the focus is really on modernization efforts, right? And really adopting things in this operational world that we often see in more recreation or user focused, right? This concept of don't force fit the user to fit the system, go the opposite way, right? And really taking a separate approach to find all those areas for additional productivity, right? So that the system is an aid and not a pain point.
Thank you, Nikki. Our next question is, what sources of integrations does Nuvolo use to correlate and identify asset recalls?
Yeah, so great question. And it's an interesting one that I've thought about a lot as of late. So kind of the big industry leaders right now is really, it's going to be Rasmus and ECRI. And so from a true integration perspective, we have done integrations with Rasmus and ECRI in the past. However, I think with the way we've architected our alerts and how I spoke to the ability to filter to impacted devices and then make a plan before you push to work order, I would state that an integration may be more costly than the value you're going to get out of it. And there's a reason why I say that. And the reason is it introduces significant risk. Even if we set up a recall perfectly, Rasmus in their naming convention and ECRI in their naming convention relative to your naming convention within your CMMS, there's likely to be nuances or differences. And with that in mind, if we were to try and create an out-of-the-box integration for recall management, my fear would be that we would at times miss a recall or deploy boots on the ground in a situation where it's a specific software revision number for a device. That's a great example. We would maybe release recalls that weren't ready to be released. So in short, we have created configured integrations for clients for both ECRI and Rasmus. We do not have a recall integration out of the box. And Dustin Smith's opinion, not Nuvolo's, is that there's risk with that. And I think it's something that as clients ask about it, we'll continue to discuss it in the future. But from where I stand in my experience, I actually see it as a benefit that we don't have an out-of-the-box integration today.
Yeah, Dustin, if I could add to that, though, I do want to point out that Nuvolo does have a integration with ECRI for subscribers of ECRI for their standardization solution that allows us to send data from Nuvolo to ECRI and essentially be, cleaned and make sure it's standardized and go back into the system. And so that is one kind of the first step is, as you pointed out, that having those different naming conventions, different nomenclature in your database makes it very, very difficult to do the recalls. But if you can take that first step by having a standardized, accepted, industry standard for your manufacturers, make, model, et cetera, your equipment types, all of that, then you're one step closer to being able to have an effective recall program.
Absolutely. Good call out, Heidi. Thank you.
All right, our next question is, how do you calculate risk score? Does Nuvolo use a standardized template to assess this?
Heidi, you want to talk about the Baratic model?
Okay, you're going to put me on the spot here. I'm like, okay, what was it again? I'm trying to remember our formula. So it is, boy, oh boy. If you have it off the top of your head, Dustin, otherwise I'm going to have to go search through my notes because I know I'm forgetting the formula, but it is a standardized formula based on, as you mentioned, the AMI guide. Basically, it's introduced in the AMI AEM guide on doing risk scores. And I want to say it's probability times severity. Thank you. I finally came to me. And that is, so again, it's a industry standard that we use. We've had lots of discussions about, other, obviously there's many different ways that the industry has attempted to do risk scoring, and that, based on the fact that it is in the AMI AEM guide, it's kind of a best practice. It's assumed a best practice, and quite frankly, it's I like to call it simple elegance. It's simple. You measure the probability of the failure, which is based on your mean time between failure, and the severity of it, which can be a subjective decision or can be based on decisions that are made at the hospital level. And once that is determined, you can come up with an effective risk scoring measurement there. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Dustin.
You nailed it. I'll leave it at that.
All right.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, how is it possible, or is it possible, to order material or services directly out of Nuvolo for maintenance, for example?
Yeah, I'll take that. So materials, we have a native integration with PartSource, and that's massively beneficial, especially if you're a PartSource Pro customer, and it can make that procurement process that much simpler. If you are looking at materials outside of PartSource or even service requests, you can absolutely set up requisition lines, and then oftentimes there's kind of one of two routes it goes after that. So some organizations, they have the privilege and the luxury of really HTM buyers, in which case a report or those requisition lines would get sent directly to that individual that ultimately sits within your HTM business unit. Or you want that to kick over to your procurement teams. And so depending on if you want to have an integration with your ERP system, it's something that we've done at this point in time. A huge portion of our clients are leveraging an ERP integration, whether that's Workday, Lawson, an Oracle product. I feel like we've seen the bulk of them at this point, and that's something we could work on. Or it's simply sending over a report at the end of a certain period for them to ultimately put that in, likely daily. So it can be done, absolutely. You're able to create those requisitions or materials requests directly from a work order, and then get that information over to the appropriate group. And I think it's a critical component of the connected workplace.
Our next question is, are integrations to ERP or third-party parts vendors like PartSource available in SMB product also?
I know that Dustin obviously was just talking about it from our enterprise version.
from our SMB, integrations are not yet supported. We find that oftentimes our larger enterprise clients have far deeper needs. So we're trying to use that as our testing ground, right? So we have a strong understanding. Our goal for our SMB or small medium business product is that it's completely self-sustainable, that there aren't any needs that aren't addressed by our out-of-the-box tool. So while there aren't any today, there most certainly will be coming here in 2022, 2023 area.
Great. Thank you, Heidi, Dustin, and Nikki for your time today and for a great presentation. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit today's sponsor to learn more about the products and the services that they provide to our industry. Please visit nuvolo.com. A quick reminder that you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. The survey will be emailed to you 1 hour after the end of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download your certificate immediately after you've submitted the survey. If you have any questions, please reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. We'll be back soon with another webinar. Please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and complimentary registration. Thank you all and have a fantastic afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.